We are back for another editorial board with a candidate for office. With us today is incumbent Representative Dan Meuser, Republican from the 9th District in 9th Congressional District of Pennsylvania, facing Democrat Gary Wegman in November. Thanks for coming back.
Glad to be here. Thanks.
We briefly talked before we got started here. Just if you could describe a little bit, you sent out a memo in mid-August that you had tested positive for COVID and sort of what you went through and how you feel now and moving forward.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, I did contract COVID in mid-August, following all safety guidelines such as wearing masks and social distancing. So it can happen to anyone at any time, unfortunately. So it's a serious pandemic. I did not have serious symptoms. Did the contacting of all those I came in contact with in the previous 2-3 days. Fortunately, I do not believe it was transmitted to anyone, and including my family or anyone for that matter. So I was confined for 15 days, and got through it. I was able to work most of the day. You'd get a little tired in the afternoon, and next thing you know, you took a 2.5-hour nap. So it was a different sort of illness, but made it through, and by September 1st, felt great, and probably hung on a little bit after that, but I was cleared at that point. Still stayed some social distancing, and but within a few days after that, I was 110%.
He said that you've had some conversations with the president since he tested positive, and you feel like he's pretty similar to what you were.
Yeah. What he's been, the information I've been receiving, his stages of symptoms seem very similar to mine, and as coincidental as this all is, just this past Saturday, I had the opportunity he asked me what were the symptoms like, as he was telling people to back off. Yeah, I think, look, he's strong. There's no underlying conditions. He has certainly a positive outlook. He wants to get back. So I'm sure he'll be back in the heavy action in a short period of time.
We'll continue with COVID here. How do you feel that the federal government's response has been? We'll get to the state response here in a moment. But, in terms of supplies and getting CARES funding, and there's 100 different lanes you can jump into here. But how do you think the federal government's handled its response?
Look, when this thing came along, right, unprecedented, we're hearing what's happening in China. All right, can it come here? I had as many briefings in the first 6 weeks, let's say, from, let's call it mid-February to April 1st, as the president. I mean, I was with Fauci without wearing masks, as were other members in late February, early March, with the whole task force, with the vice president. We were in the White House getting briefed as well. So the information, everyone had the same information. If you really look at it, what the president's remarks were, and Dr. Fauci's, and Redmond, the CDC director, and Dr. Birx, who was brought in, she headed up Vice President Pence's task force. They were really very, very, very similar. Just the president did move forward and prohibited China travel. Right, wanted more prohibitions. I mean, they were working on that from Europe and everything else. He did institute the National Emergency Act. I think that was January 30th, perhaps, pretty early, where he enacted that. And then, you also got to look at the fairness of this. He's the president. He's catching all the blame by some, right? Certainly, Speaker Pelosi made the comments she made regarding, hey, come down to Chinatown, San Francisco, everything's great. I mean, that was late February. Andrew Cuomo saying, hey, the risk in New York is very low, come to New York. That was like March 7th. I mean, they didn't cancel the St. Patrick's Day parade until, I think, March 12th, or 13th, or 14th. So there were plenty of mistakes made along the way. Under the circumstances, I think the federal government's response was very strong. Moved in on it fast. The president brought the scientists around him. There was no shortage of scientists and health experts around him. He also brought in businesses as things went. It was a very inclusionary approach. Okay, how can you guys do this? What do you think we should do? What's your input on slow down but not a shutdown, and maintaining high levels of health and safety? What should we be doing? A lot of input there. You don't create a plan like largely Mnuchin did and the president. The CARES Act, and there was others that had input, but that was a very good plan. You don't create that in isolation, right? I mean, it was very focused. It was focused on families with the stimulus funds, with the stimulus checks. It was focused on hospitals. Let's reimburse them for any COVID-related issues. It was focused on businesses, the PPP, small business, right? In the end, there were 5 million businesses that got on average about $105,000 loans, added up to over $500 billion, but saved them. I mean, our unemployment would have been far worse. It was pretty bad, but would have absolutely been far worse. I mean, you ask any small business owner, they'll tell you that was a lifeline. So that was well orchestrated, and it was bipartisan. Obviously, it was a bipartisan bill in the end. What else was part of that? The unemployment compensation, right? That was controversial, but we compromised. We didn't want the $600, frankly, supplements. That was where Nancy Pelosi felt it needed to be. A lot of small businesses were very unhappy about that. People are making more, not going to work. But, that was the only way it was going to get done in a speedy period of time. That thing needed to get done. We were having calls. It was very impressive, actually, with our caucus, myself, others, some small, sometimes 10 members, sometimes 40 members, with Mnuchin and Mark Meadows, and you could actually hear the president in the background saying, what was that? What was that suggestion? And this was one. It was on applications for the PPP for banks, and they couldn't, whether they were making their own applications for PPP, and the banks were saying, wait a second, your own applications, let us use our own business applications, because this is all electronic. It's not like we're filling out applications here. Let us use our own. And the president, I can hear him in the back saying, well, why can't we use our own? Let's look into that. Before that call was done, they said, we're going to let the banks use their own applications. So that's the sort of hands-on that took place on this. And again, inclusionary, looking at the vaccine, the therapeutics, making sure money was established for that. So I think it was covered. I think it was we did well. We need to continue to do well. We need to learn and adapt to really, the idea of saving lives, but not killing livelihoods. And, we're going to talk about the state's response. I mean, I don't think they kept the latter in mind, as well as the White House did.
Where do we stand on perhaps another COVID relief bill?
Well, good question. We should absolutely have one. Why we don't is, just like pretty much everything that's existed in this Congress, it's very political. Speaker Pelosi, came out with the $3.2 trillion HEROES Act that had more in it than things that were not related to the COVID situation, to the crisis at hand. They went as far back as huge bailouts for states, pension funds, multi-employer pension funds, which, by the way, is a problem. It has to be addressed, but it existed before COVID. It was supposed to be focused here. It had dollars that allowed illegal immigrants to receive stimulus. We actually tried to pass an amendment saying, all right, if we're going to vote for HEROES, if we're going to consider it, we're not going to allow stimulus checks to go to illegals. They voted it down on the House floor. So it's a very deliberate use of their influence and power, which on the same note makes it a poison pill, which also makes it impossible that it would make it through the Senate. So there was more in there as well. That was it. They included their H.R. 1 bill, basically a federal government takeover of elections, right? The federal government's going to make the rules for elections nationwide. That's what their H.R. 1 this year was. They included that in the HEROES Act. Why? So because they thought they'd get away with it? because, they wouldn't leverage it. So that went nowhere. But where we are now, and then of course, Senate came out with a far more targeted bill, which I agreed with. I would have voted for it quickly. It had liability in it, liability protections. It had stimulus checks. It had $300 unemployment compensation, and it had extended use of the PPP. It was about $130 billion that hadn't been used. So and that was an $800 billion bill. No small change. But Speaker Pelosi, that got voted down. So here we are, right? She's got the new bill she's got is 2.2. Really, with the triggers, it's closer to 2.6. It's not focused in the manner that, it was a real shame. I mean, I got to tell you, there were Democrats on the House floor that are my friends. That I'm in the Problem Solvers Caucus, that helps us be friends. But they're good people.
Yeah.
And they're over imploring Speaker Pelosi to pull it back. I was watching it and put something forth that could actually pass, that will actually get done, because this thing had no chance.
You talked about the Pennsylvania response. You've been, critical of the governor. A lot of people on both sides of the aisle have. Thursday, the federal appeals court put the restrictions on gatherings and restaurants and things like that back in place. You said the governor's shutdown orders were hastily announced and harmed thousands of businesses. Where do we? I don't know if you can say where do we stand on legal challenges, if you're sure where it's going to go from here, and what are you hearing from business owners and voters in your district about the way the governor and the state officials handled it?
Well, they think a lot of things were unfair. They don't think they had any input, and I mean big organizations. I mean like the Grocery Association. Why didn't you just ask us? They'd say to me, why don't you bring us in and have a conversation with us? I think that the plan to pick winners and losers was a horrible premise to begin with. There was no chance that was going to work out well. And I'll tell you what, a senior person in his administration, I texted him that night saying, this isn't going to work, right? Because you're going to miss the whole supply chain at best. Oh no, we're going to decide who's life-sustaining. And whose definition is that anyway? That's a new, beyond essential, life-sustaining. And then we're going to accept waivers, and we're going to work round the clock for the next 4 days and see who we're going to give waivers to and who we won't. That's crazy. I mean, what should have been done is we establish the essential. We have a broad net. Here are the safety requirements that we want you to maintain, right? Masks, social distancing, temperature checks, whatever they could be. They could have been strict at the time, right? At the end of March and in April, it could have been strict because this thing was there were a lot of unknowns. And then you can back off rather than increasing them over time. And if you're backing off, then that's a good thing, right? Things are loosening up. We're gearing up. We're equipping for this. If even the restaurants, and listen to them, let manufacturers come in. Here's how we can do it. We'll be apart 10 feet. Don't say because you make something that's going to go on a fire truck, you're okay, but you're making something that's going on a roller coaster, so you're not okay. I mean, that's pretty much how it went down. And then not to mention the fact that Main Street was shut down and Walmart was booming. That's great. Particularly since most of what you're buying off the shelves of Walmart come from China anyway. I mean, that was like the ultimate kind of insult. So I think he didn't have a chance. And then why not learn? Why not say, wait a minute, maybe we didn't do it right the first time. So moving forward, let's institute these health and safety standards for all. And they're going to be strict. If you can abide by them, good. If you can't, sorry. And with the restaurants, have them come in. What the shame of it was, he lost a lot of trust, right? He lost a lot of trust because he was doing things, again, on his own, making calls, making mistakes along the way. Look, they all did. But, out there saying, wear a mask, you got to socially distance, and then he's out there with a mob in the street. And I don't mean to say mob in a very disrespectful way, but clearly, when somebody's chanting Blue Lives Murder, That to me is not a peaceful group. It's not violent, but that's not exactly a peaceful message or a helpful message. And there he is standing with them, right?
You're saying was, but isn't it still kind of like that right now?
What?
Even to this day, even still with restrictions and crowds and all of that. So you're saying his response was kind of questionable.
Yeah.
Are we still not in that kind of questionable area?
Yeah, we definitely are. Now, some of it's loosened up. Some of it's just not being abided by. I mean, it is difficult to enforce, so that's also the sad part of it, right? Like there's no ownership. We say we're doing this all together. No, we weren't. Right? He was calling the shots, and we were told to listen and abide and march in the right direction. So I mean, the haircutters. I mean, granted, right? I mean, you can understand that, particularly the first 3 weeks, and then come up with some better standards and at least work with them, at least show some empathy. They all went underground, right? They're cutting hair in garages because either that or, they're got to move out of their house or their apartment. So I think there were just a tremendous amount of mistakes made.
Sort of along those same lines, it feels like we spent a lot of wasted breath arguing about crowd sizes at football games and things like that. When, we're at this moment where we have a lot of kids that don't have access to their learning right now. Have we sort of misprioritized some things in terms of we're all rah, let's get I want to go watch my kids play, and you have, son that played football, I have a kid that plays high school soccer. I had the chance to see them, which I appreciated. But in the meantime, we have kids that can only go to school 1 or 2 days a week, or they can't get access because of part of your district is so rural, they don't have the broadband access they need. Have we sort of misprioritized some things, with the arguments we're having?
Yeah, but we did that before the crisis, right? I mean, to me, the best thing about a school and a school district is great teachers, not how beautiful your football stadium is. And my daughters played tennis and soccer and all that through high school. My son's a football player, so but let's have great teachers, right? That should truly be job one, and great education for our young people. So I agree. The idea that one school district has laptops for its students and they can come a couple of days and then they got great access and they got the nice remotes going, it's all virtual, and another school district doesn't, that's awful, right? That absolutely should be job one. I do think we, just like with the economy and stores and businesses and restaurants, we've got to be smart. We can be smart, safe, and be somewhat open, right? We got to lean forward, that expression, like figure it out. What's the best way? And many schools did. I mean, I got many school districts in my district that I'm just really proud of. I mean, they got creative and all. And they built trust by keeping the parents in the loop and the teachers and making the students understand. Hey, you feel symptoms, you got to tell us. Now, granted, kids don't feel the symptoms. So, but doing other things to monitor it, such as temperature checks, for instance. Yeah, I agree. But on the same note, I don't agree either with the 250 person limit at the games. Right? I mean, one stadium is bigger than another. There are some football teams that have 70 kids on them. I understand. My son went to a smaller school, so it's 140 with the cheerleaders and coaches and refs. You're letting 30 people in the stands, and it could be a huge stand. They could be 30 feet apart from each other, and that's a shame. See, there's one thing though. High school is fleeting. Right, that with your kids. I mean, it's got if they got their senior year in football or tennis, or this is the year, the idea of not seeing that,
Sure,
it's a little heartbreaking.
yeah.
So you need to again, take those things into consideration and be smart about it and work it out.
I think we've had, like we've said previously, we've had a handful of candidates in here, and the word that a lot of them use is inconsistency. We hear this, okay, we're going to make it a local choice, but here's 25. That's not really a local choice then.
Right. No, it's not.
Okay. I would just sort of piggyback off on that. We hit on it briefly. Broadband. Your district is not quite as rural as Representative Keller's district is, but there are some spots where broadband's not readily available there. How do you go to Washington and sort of push for rural access? Other than from Philadelphia or from Pittsburgh. I mean, how do you get the access we need in the 9th district?
We just keep pushing, and there's a lot of conversation on rural broadband. I mean, 5 or 6 years ago, maybe 7 now. All right, yeah, we need rural broadband. The rural communities were like, I guess we're not at the top of the list, but it's going to come.
Sure.
It should have come by now. It really should have. The USDA is putting some pretty good money into investments in rural broadband. I don't know why I have difficulty saying that. The governor's office actually did too in their recent bill, and the General Assembly. So the attention is there, the conversation is there. Our farmers and those that live in the more rural areas need to know where it's regular topic of conversation, and that's usually a start, right? When there's a lot of conversation about it, it means there's a lot of consensus, and okay, hey, we got to work this in places, and it is being worked in. It was definitely worked into the Farm Bill and in some other areas where the dollars are there. We got to get a little bit more cooperation from the private sector that's handling this, right? Maybe the return on investment isn't as great in Snyder County and Center County, or maybe not so much Center County, in Tioga County, Northumberland County for that matter. But you know what? But that's why we're subsidizing it. So we need probably more of an aggressive approach, and it really needs to get done because it's beyond just annoying. I mean, it's essential for farmers. They're basing everything on GPS and everything else, and students, businesses. We want business expansion. They're not going to expand if there's no broadband.
You represent the district with Geisinger, a chunk of Geisinger's footprint there, and they're doing thousands of telemedicine appointments now that they weren't doing a year ago.
So true.
Critical.
Great example. Absolutely critical.
Oh gosh, a complete pivot to mail-in voting. Is it safe? And do you think a couple points to it? Is it safe? Do you think the voters are well enough informed about the process and how it works? And I know in July you introduced a Stop Mail Voter Fraud Act. Yeah. Where does that stand? And what does that do?
Well, I just can't help but look at it somewhat this way. If you owed somebody $50, would you put a $50 bill in the mail and send it to them? People don't. They don't put cash in the mail. But ballots are 1,000% safe. There should be no worry whatsoever. So here's the situation. We're going to have 6 times, 7 times, 10 times more mail-in ballots than we had before. At least Pennsylvania, it's a solicited ballot, right? Either absentee or just asking for a ballot, which is a little odd why we have both, but okay. I think the operational requirements required that to exist that way. So that shouldn't it shouldn't be necessarily a big problem in Pennsylvania. Now, a few things though, right? How well are we documenting? I mean, I know some areas that are getting, and this isn't in Pennsylvania, so I'm going to focus on Pennsylvania, but there are many rental apartments throughout the country, in Nevada, North Carolina, South Carolina. I hear about them, I see them, right? Because we're very focused on election security, where they're getting mailed, where they're doing the universal balloting, they're getting 4 or 5 or 6 ballots at one apartment, where some people have passed away, some people, obviously don't live there, only one person lives there. So that's a bit of a problem in some states.
So that's a separate issue, though, isn't it? The voter roll purge itself. I mean,
it's a separate issue for Pennsylvania,
right?
But it's not a separate issue for the national election. Right. So some states have this, sure. and that is worthy of concern. Mm-hmm. Just ballots everywhere. Now, the ballot boxes. Some of the issues we have here in Pennsylvania, the ballot boxes. Look, initially, first glance, you wouldn't think, all right, it's an added mailbox. If it creates convenience, what's the problem? Well, the problem is everybody knows what's in there, There's only one thing in there, and it's ballots. So there's a certain amount of curiosity. We haven't heard of any ballot boxes being robbed or set afire or anything, but you know what's in there, and you could certainly, you got added ballots. If someone were to go through, I mean, there's no question that you go in and pull a lever or hit a button to vote. It's not the same as filling out a ballot, maybe with somebody's assistance, and getting it in. So, clearly there'll be some of that, right? I mean, young person, older person that lives with a young person, they're going to change their vote. Now, is that enough to make a difference? I don't think so. That end of things. Mm-hmm. But there's a number of potential problems that can add up to some pretty significant numbers, right? So let's just so that would be minimal. Now the 3-day postponement of counting the votes. Okay, again, first glance, we're supposed to have them in at 8:00 on election night. Now it's 3 days later. All right, I mean, could there be a load up based upon what the level of turnout was? And when you have that tight of a time frame right then, which ones are going to count and which ones won't? And who's going to make that determination? And because they're already saying that a signature won't be enough, a false signature won't be enough to disqualify a ballot. So my question was, okay, if Dan Meuser sends in his absentee ballot and I write Richard Nixon on it, does that disqualify? Because they're saying a signature won't disqualify. That alone won't disqualify. The other thing is go on and ask for an absentee ballot. It asks you for your name, your address, your this, your that. Okay, all well and good. And then it asks you for your driver's license number. So I was glad to see that. I was just testing it. I wasn't getting one because I'm going to vote in person. But the next question is your last 4 digits, your Social Security. But then the next question is, mark here if you don't have either one. Okay, so it's not necessary. So you can order a ballot without that. So that's not a great thing, right? So, look, they knocked the Green Party candidate off. All right, they faxed in their application why that would happen. I mean, that's perhaps 20,000 votes right there. Mm. The people, global warming is their issue. They would vote for the Green Party candidate. So that's 20,000. You add up all of these other, potential situations.
In a state where 50,000 votes settled it last time.
Yeah, right. I mean, in the New Jersey primary, 10% of the mail-in ballots were DQ'd, were disqualified.
Why?
For missing information, lack of information, questionable information, signatures, 10%.
Right. That's why I ask if we're doing enough to educate the voters on how to do it appropriately.
There's a lot of education out there, but whether or not everybody's picking it up.
Is it a problem with not having a national sort of, I don't know what the right word is, but every state is its own election? Is that part of it?
Well, you'd hate to take that away, right?
Right.
A lot of states think they're doing it very well. Washington, the state of Washington, for instance, has had mail-in ballots for a long time, so they're more used to it. At least they tell me. We're not, right? So we're changing all these election laws, or at least trying to, pretty close to an election. That's never really a good thing.
What do you see happening then on election night and the next days forward?
It's hard to tell. Right? Anybody who knows, I'd like to talk to them. But if you go with what's pretty likely here, because there will be more Democrats sending in mail-in ballots than Republicans, the president's going to be ahead. The president will be ahead by a lot. And then we'll see a creep, likely. Mm-hmm. So hopefully, I'm supportive of President Trump's re-election, so hopefully he's up by, 500,000 votes, and then they say, well, we only have another 300,000 to count, so, we can call it by Saturday or Sunday, but it's really not going to be able to be called until at least that Friday when the votes come in. The other thing is this, though, keep this in mind, all this push for mail-in ballots and, largely by the Democrats, and okay, with Corona and some of the changes we had, and no excuse mail-in ballots that our legislature passed, okay. But this double envelope thing for security and sending it in, this whole all this manipulation, for lack of a better word, might not be in their interest in the end, because that's something that they're not going to change. The requirement of you got an envelope and then you need that security envelope. Is everybody going to follow that? Or are they just going to drop it in the ballot box outside their house?
So go back to my original question, is it safe?
Well, it's less safe,
It's less secure.
less secure.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And that's why I did that, my bill, the Scam Act, just doing my best to alert people that voter fraud is a crime and the penalties are going to be heightened. So I wanted to get the word out. Look, if you're voting on your own and doing all the things, one citizen, one vote, you have nothing to worry about. If you plan on voting for 4 or 5 other people, because it says multiple in my bill, then you got something to worry about.
I don't want to be gone, but I know that you said, that you said nobody can predict it, but can you see unrest on both sides in the days following, especially with Trump supporters or Biden supporters? Is that any kind of concern going into this? I mean, obviously it is now, as you see a lot of, so afterwards, obviously Trump people are going to say we won, Biden people are going to say, so do you see a lot of unrest starting to happen, especially with ballots being found in dumpsters and stuff like that?
I'm sure there will be. Hopefully it won't be out of control. We're going to see that creep, I think. I don't see how else that's not going to happen. And so, and then if it's not enough, who knows? Enough to put Biden over the top in Pennsylvania. Hopefully we have good information coming out on it to people, and hopefully there's not too many examples of some egregious situations. Like I said, a ballot box being burned up or something of that nature. Look, voter oppression, people also ought to get this, right? And Republicans and Democrats, it'd be nice if we could be unified in certain messages, like law and order. I think that's a message we should all be able to get behind. But voter oppression is unacceptable. Any sort of voter oppression at all, keeping somebody from voting, or a fraudulent vote that neutralizes or eliminates somebody else's vote, is equally inappropriate. So we should be able to help in that way.
You hit on law and order. That's where I was going next. I mean, obviously since the middle of May, obviously since George Floyd, it's been a hot topic in the country. Where do we, in Washington, where do we stand on sort of any sort of universal policing reform? Is something of that effect?
Yeah, well, we were all for it. I mean, particularly at this, crisis situation, got to do something, right? I mean, even if somebody said, well, 99.99999% of police are terrific, well, we still needed to do something, because there's communities out there that don't always think that they're terrific. So that needs to be taken into consideration. Look, my father was a police officer, right? I mean, I came in, wearing this. And I don't wear this to be offensive. I wear this because everyone should support our police. Now, corrective measures and police reforms, we had it in the Justice Act. We had something. It was good. Tim Scott's bill out of the Senate. I mean, it would have done some important things. Maybe not everything that they wanted, but that's not how government works. That's not how my household works. So yeah, let's improve. Let's correct. Let's agree on and have the police agree, and also have the community leadership agree, right? But the idea of being permissive or tacitly compliant, if you will, with lawlessness, that encourages the lawlessness. So I've had a real problem with that, with some Democrat leaders that wouldn't denounce it, and again, I think that encourages it.
Do you think some of that would hurt, like, obviously, our district and a lot of the rural areas, your policemen, It's not like we have 500,000 police running around a city where you don't know. So I'm sure in your area, you're familiar with your police. Like in Sunbury, you're familiar with the
Yeah.
police. Do you think those kind of changes hurt those kind of departments?
Well, no, not in the Justice Bill, and I did ask to a number of my city police what they thought of it, and they were fine with it. As a matter of fact, most of which is talked about, they're like, we don't do that. No, that's not what we've taught since I've been here for 20 years. Neck holds and things of that nature. The thing with no-knock warrants. Look, they take that into discretion, right? I mean, if there's a dangerous person back behind that door that's armed, they still take, even if they have the no-knock warrant, they're still careful. Who else is in there? Police use that sort of judgment. Should we just wait? Let them come out before we create added chaos. So they do a lot of smart things. And, when you do it for 5, 10, 20, 25 years, and then you're taught by such good people that are from the community, they really get better at it. So, no, I would do first no harm to our police. And it's interesting. My father actually consulted me on it. He was a police officer, detective for 20 years. And, I talked with him and many others. We have some police, former policemen that are in the house, and taking in as much information as possible from Pennsylvania state troopers. Pennsylvania state troopers are stellar. When do you ever hear a problem, really? Maybe there is, I don't know about, with Pennsylvania state troopers. I mean, they are tested, they are put through all kinds of mental stress tests, right? How to use a gun when, how to use force. I mean, we really have a great police force in Pennsylvania.
So we're fortunate enough to see a lot of retired troopers become chiefs around here and maybe pass that information
Exactly.
on.
Exactly.
We have two members of our community advisory board with us. Mike Molsevich from Lewisburg. I'm going to get Mike to ask a question first. If you can't hear it, I'll listen. I have the volume all the way up. If you can't hear it, I'll read it. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, coming through?
Yes, gotcha.
All right. Congressman, you made several references to your father and children, and all very nice and very encouraging. So here's the question. What will you tell your grandchildren when they ask you why you did not do more for climate change when you were in Congress?
Okay. Well, I am not a climate change denier. Just because I'm a Republican doesn't mean you're a climate change denier. The issue over the years has gotten politicized. You're either a knuckle-dragging denier or you're an environmental wacko. There's a lot of people in between, and I'm definitely in between. Now, I do look at the data, and I do love the fact that the private sector has embraced renewable energies and clean energy, and businesses. Heck, the Fort Indian Town Gap Army Depot is almost energy efficient or sufficient or independent. It's amazing. And because what's happened is, because the trends are there, companies are adopting, because maybe it's a cool thing to do, right? Whatever it is, they're adopting, even my former business, and they find that they're getting a return on the investment. So it's working out. And so that's a good thing. Now, we have, and the United States has, and this is largely due to natural gas, because of its low carbon emissions. The United States, for the last 2 years, is the only industrialized nation that has reduced its carbon emissions for the last 2 years. We want to keep that going, right? By all means, we want to keep that going. Now, if you think that the solution is to, and I don't think you think you do, that you do, but to eliminate fossil fuels or to adopt the Green New Deal or to put more subsidies into wind turbines, that's where we got to talk and really look at what's the best route to go here. Because wind turbines have a significant amount of subsidies associated with them and all kinds of loans. And you know what? Their environmental friendliness is questionable as they get put up and everything else. Solar, I think, is terrific. We need to make more solar here in the United States. It seems to be most of it's made in China. So we should work on changing that. But the idea of banning fracking, I'm not going to get into that argument with what Joe Biden's position on it. I know what Kamala Harris's position is on it. I know where Elizabeth Warren's position is on it. Granted, they're not running for president, but there's a lot of people that actually want to ban fracking. That's not a good idea. So, look, I'm as you said. I mean, I got daughters in their 20s. I got a son that's 18. We know that, and it's not just because of this, that many young people, it's their number one issue. All right, so to turn your back on that number one is foolish. I wouldn't do that, and I didn't 10 years ago. I didn't 5 years ago. I'm for it, but we have to have a reasonable approach. The Green New Deal is not the reasonable approach. So, maybe that's the extreme. So let's work on that. But I'm not at all against most efficient, clean environment and energy usage possible that's economically feasible.
Okay, Harvey. This is Harvey Edwards. He's a member of our community. No, he's a member of our editorial board. Go ahead, Harvey.
I think I'll take it all the way back to COVID. There's no question that all of us would like the schools to be open, the economy to be open, and I think we all could agree that until COVID is contained, that really can't happen as quickly as we would like. You said that the federal response, you think, has been competent. We are 4% of the world's population, and we have 25% of the cases, 205,000 plus Americans dead. How can you square that the federal response has been adequate?
Well, fair question. Well, I'm not sure how much else could have been done. A mask mandate in mid-March, okay, but Dr. Fauci and all of them never suggested that, right? This is America. It's not some of those other countries. And what our government needs to do is frankly better provide information so people can understand the importance and have people, really feel part of it. And yes, social distancing, I say it all the time. I'm not sure there's any member of Congress, Republican or Democrat, and say, hey, wear the masks, social distance, understand this thing is contagious and all. But if you go back to where the president, the White House, Vice President Pence, what we did, prohibiting the travel. I know you've heard that. Engaging when, for instance, 3M wasn't making the PPE, they did engage the Defense Production Act on them. This Project Warp Speed related to vaccines. I mean, again, these things have become political, but a lot of money, a lot of focus, and these are private companies. I mean, they're not going to. Johnson & Johnson's not putting itself on the line forever to help the president message. That's just not right. And I'll also just add this, and I'm interested in your having a conversation with you. The United States, I know this is, for whatever reason, seems to be a foregone conclusion that the United States is worse off than other countries. But do you know that the UK has 9 people per 100,000? The US has 2.5 fatalities per 100,000. The UK is like number 3 in the country. In the world. We're number 10. France is worse. Spain is worse. Brazil is worse. Indonesia is worse. And, that's not saying, hey, we did great, and use the word competent, and I'll won't argue with that way of describing it. But all those other countries, South Korea, I think is now worse off than us. Mexico has, I think it's 8 persons per 100,000. So they're in the top as well. So we're not as bad as we tend to get blamed for being.
as a follow-up to that, though, the Woodward interviews with the president indicated that he knew early on how dangerous this virus was, that he intentionally downplayed it, thus, as a role model, not wearing masks, not necessarily socially distancing. Even now, the Rose Garden ceremony to introduce the Supreme Court justice, there's a spike there of an outbreak as a result, people believe. And so the way I would pose this question, has the president done enough as a role model to help citizens understand how dangerous this virus is, ironically, and especially since he now has contracted this virus?
Yeah. And look, a fair question, right? A reasonable, debatable question. You know, if you look back, yes, the president extended a relatively calm voice, definitely was looking at things as the glass is half full, not half empty. That's him, I guess. That's how he felt best to show leadership. Now look at his actions, however. His actions were far more aggressive than many of the others who were criticizing him. You know, again, the travel, the national emergency, the amount of money that was put forward on the CARES Act, trillions of dollars, a shutdown allowing governors to make the call without getting in the way of how to handle that, you know, sending the ships, whatever Andrew Cuomo, whatever Governor Newhouse wanted, basically, was there. His actions were not dismissive, or his actions showed a lot of seriousness to this. Look, I mean, could more have been done? Yeah. But you know what? I'd like to see Andrew Cuomo answer that question, or Governor Wolf, and hopefully they would also admit they could have done more.
I'll just ask you this hypothetical, since you've had the ear of the president. When he overcomes this COVID battle and he goes back out campaigning, if he came to you and said, should I encourage my followers to socially distance and wear masks and wear a mask myself, what advice would you give him? Considering that he has been having these rallies previously with no social distancing, no masking or whatever, and he has contracted COVID, what would you suggest to him if he asked for your opinion?
I would say yes, we should abide by CDC guidelines and socially distance and wear masks whenever possible. And, you know, the mask, I mean, I'm not wearing one right now, right? Because they informed me that it was okay in their view, and in my view as well. So the occasion, we need people to understand their real responsibility and not do it, not engage in the behavior you're suggesting because they're being told to do it. You know, I got to tell you, there's a lot of people out there, even when they look at like Joe Biden's commercial, we can't open our economy until we control the virus. You know, and you got to take this in consideration. A lot of people think that means control you. They do. Which businesses should stay open, when you can go out, when you can eat, when you can have a drink. If you order a soda, you can't be at that table. But if you order a hot dog, you're good and you can take your mask off. I mean, that's like, you know, a lot of people see that as Big Brother style government. Now, we continue to be in a crisis. Again, we need to be engaged. There needs to be more information. People need to be all in. But the basics need to be covered, as I think you and I definitely agree on. Wearing a mask and keeping social distancing. But, you know, you got to see it from various views and then come up with the best answer for all.
We appreciate you coming, sir, and best of luck on November 3rd.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
I appreciate it.
Yep.
Nice talking to you. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.